Our next speaker is going to bring a different type of warmth to the stage. Please be easy on her. She just completed her first week teaching high school. And she's here to talk to you about poetry. This is Shelbi Bretz.
Good evening. I have written a poem for you about poetry, but it is not what you think. I am not some English teacher nerd with glasses and coffee and paper and pencil come to lecture you on the merits of an overwrought ivory tower form of writing. I use a pen. But for real, enough of whatever antiquated vision of poetry you have in your mind. Maybe you had a rock star high school English teacher like me, but get rid of that, whatever you're thinking about, because I want to talk about poetry in a different way tonight. Because poetry is not for someone else. It's not for writers or poets or English majors or angsty tweens or sad shut-ins or crappy greeting cards. It's not something someone else does. Poetry is for you. Let me say that one more time. Poetry is for you. Oh, and I'm not even talking about the reading of poetry. As an English teacher, I must say, do that. It's good for you. Stretch your thinking, broaden your horizons. Not right now. That's not what I'm here about. I'm here because I think writing poetry is incredibly powerful, and we don't really know how or why to do it. I used to think poetry boring and confusing and frustrating and rhyming and written by a bunch of genius old dead white guys who had nothing better to do than frustrate future high school English students. Well, then I had a poetry professor my sophomore year of college who made our class write a slew of really horrible poems in one semester, and I hated every single one of them, but I kind of liked writing them. So the next time I had something difficult to think about, I decided to write it in the form of a poem. And without restrictions or the fear of an audience or a falsified vision of what poetry is supposed to be, something magical happened. And it was not the poem. That poem is not magical. It shouldn't be published. It probably shouldn't even be read. And that is a good thing, because the magic happened in my mind. See, by changing forms, my ability to process my experiences also shifted. I gave myself a space to spin beauty from my broken places. And then, in my mind, beauty grew. So I kept doing this, pretty positive that my teacher-minded brain was unique in this preference for poetic processing, until poetry popped up on the spring curriculum for 150 sophomores at Lincoln High School, and I said, "Ooh, you have to write me poems." And they did. And again, what was magical was not the poems themselves, though many of them were conventionally brilliant. What was magical was what these initially resistant students had to say about writing their poetry. Sentiments of relief and joy at a safe space to process their lives. Poetry had met a need for me in my darkest hours, and it met a need for these 15-year-olds, a way and space to think about their experiences. Now, you must know that writing poetry is hard, and it feels and looks extremely messy, and the expectations of what the poetry of others looks like meshes with what our hearts implore us to write, and we can get frustrated and confused and stuck in our emotions. But I think you should try it, because poetry has the power to delve straight into our best and worst moments. It lets us feel sounds and taste colors and smell emotions. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it reveals invisible strengths. What else could take one small fraction of an experience and give insight to the whole? It has no rules. It need not be shared. It defies models and perfection. It requires only the bravery that comes with risk and the time to explore within. The really important part of poetry is the space it offers for us to reshape how we think about our own experiences. Poetry doesn't work because it is a poem. It works because as you write, you decide what lives, what dies, what you emphasize, and whose perspective reigns. Poetry works because you choose how to see the truth in yourself, for yourself, by yourself, with your words. So I encourage you to give voice to your voice. Let the unspoken be whispered into the sacred void of your inner sanctuary. Start with an image, a feeling, a word, or a phrase. Put pen to paper. Do not judge yourself. Give your words room to breathe. And write. Write a poem. And if you hate it, at least you breathed into one experience anew. Thank you.
I did tell Shelbi that in the time she was speaking, I was going to write a poem about her pet rabbit. And I assure you, nothing rhymes with sausages. That's okay. Aswaj.